your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Chrissie is hilarious.
Chrissie, have you ever heard of the comedian Basha K. Ali?
No, that sounds like something you yell at before you blow up a plane.
30 seconds remaining.
But you know what, good thing to say I dabbled in stand-up or something. I haven't been disrespectful to you at all.
I was very confused by the title, Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that's also what we call it when Ash takes off his shirt. I shouldn't be up here. I should be in school on the other side of the ocean. Hello. Welcome to a very special episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. You can listen to this podcast on Rumble, Rockfin, iTunes, SoundCloud, everywhere, really. As long as they'll have me. Twitter, Facebook sometimes, Twitch even. So thank you to everybody who's tuning in, either live in the chat right now or who will be listening to the replay a bit later on. I'm so excited to have this guest on today. I just finished watching his latest film. He's a political commentator, author of over a dozen books. Several of them are New York Times bestsellers. He is a filmmaker, and his latest film, Police State, can be streamed now on Rumble. I'm so happy to have on the show today Dinesh D'Souza. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks, and glad to be on the show.
I'm so excited you're here. I just finished watching Police State last night. I don't know why this film, this should be shown in every civics class, in every high school. This should be shown in every college across the country. But places like Walmart and Amazon won't even sell the DVD. And it's such an important film. And I feel like I need to watch it again because it's so dense with information and everything that's leading up to why this country is currently in a police state, basically.
You know, the thing about the film is it's not really about the left or the right. The film focuses on the very basic liberties that we have taken for granted in this country for 200 years. In fact, a lot of them are just enumerated right there in the Bill of Rights. And these are liberties that are not supposed to be open for political negotiation. In other words, even majorities should not be able to cancel out your right to free speech, my right to conscience, our right to assemble or to petition the government for grievances, or even the fundamental idea of equal rights and equal justice under the law. And so, as someone who came to America as a teenager, as an immigrant, entranced by the opportunity, the social mobility of the country, and then, of course, this idea that you have the founders call them unalienable rights. And then to fast forward today and realize that, wow, one by one, these rights are being taken away. And the pretext might vary. In some cases, it's because of 9/11. Oh, it's because of COVID. Oh, it's because of January 6th. But whatever the rationale, the movement is in the same direction. So people have indications that this is going on. The film just pulls it all together and puts it into a story that's understandable, creates a chronology, and I think sounds a warning.
It does really put things in great order because I think a lot of people, I'm in my 30s, I think a lot of folks are going, hey, I remember, I was alive posting on social media. A lot of us were in the early, golden days of YouTube where we were able to post, share, make videos about any topic. And a lot of us say, when did this start happening? What year exactly was it when it felt like all this censorship started to really gear up? And you do put a very good timeline on things, and you kind of basically take us through how did the police state develop. It kind of started with Ruby Ridge into Waco, and a lot of folks think that 9/11 and the Patriot Act was the beginning of this kind of cranking up of censorship. But it's interesting to see how the seeds were planted even before 9/11, and you bring in the FISA courts, how the FBI is basically like it's wild to me. Like our own government is basically intimidating us to either forget or not fight for our own rights or the rights of our children or to protect our own children. And they're doing a pretty good job at it.
The police state is the exact opposite of the American founding, because the American founding, the idea is that the government is the enemy of rights, and that the way to protect our rights is to limit the power of the government. That's when you read the Bill of Rights, almost every sentence begins, Congress shall make no law. Congress shall make no law doing this. Congress shall make no law doing that. And a police state, by contrast, is all power to the state. The state might use private entities, but the private entities are tools of state interest. And then the government kind of goes to war against the citizens. The citizens are seen as kind of a threat. This is why you have to take the citizens' rights away, so that they become subjects. They become, in a sense, subservient to the government. And all of this has escalated dramatically in the last couple of years. The roots go further back, and there's actually a bipartisan origin of the police state after 9/11. Many Americans, Republicans, Democrats, were like, we need to give the government these enhanced powers to protect us from foreign terrorists who want to kill us. Okay, but nobody thought, and certainly no one expected, that they would take these exact same powers and then turn them against American citizens, turn them against political opponents, use them to crush dissent. Go after your political enemies. These are all the hallmarks of police state tactics. We see it in North Korea, China, Cuba, Iran, the old Soviet Union. And it's, for me, so disheartening to see those exact same things now creeping into the United States.
It is. And what I like about the film is the through line is you're sitting down with Dan Bongino, and he has a history of, I guess he was a former NYPD. I don't know if he was a detective or just like a regular cop, but he has a lot of knowledge about these things. And I like the point that you guys bring up. Not everybody is trying to be an influencer or outspoken. Like myself, I'm a comedian. I'm very passionate about freedom of speech. I'm very passionate about like your right to be able to have sarcasm, make jokes, and you shouldn't be thrown in jail for that, as we see happening more so in places like maybe Canada. But it's something I'm always very vigilant about. And I like that you explain, well, the average person who's not outspoken politically, maybe they're not having hot takes on Twitter. They're just a regular person going to their job. They might think, oh, everything's kind of okay because they don't see tanks in the street. You don't see like a North Korean-esque regime walking down the road. You're not seeing, a lot of people will compare, oh, well, you're not seeing people knocking door to door, like looking for Jews. It's not overt in your face where you're seeing like a military presence. There's not somebody yet knocking on your door, taking away all your guns. And so I think a lot of Americans, there's this sense of like, oh, well, it's not that bad. I'm not really online very much. I'm not like an internet person. And I like that you discuss how that's not even necessary now, because the government kind of does its bidding kind of secretly. They'll sort of outsource, like we're seeing now with the reports that just came out with the House Judiciary Committee. Jim Jordan was just talking about how there's this collaboration between the White House, academia, and big tech to censor folks. So it's like we don't really need to see this kind of in your face, I guess, sort of military presence, because it's all kind of being done under the surface in kind of a more sneaky kind of way that I think evades the average person.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I think it's also true that our police state marches behind the propagandistic banners of saving democracy, upholding the rule of law, protecting truth against misinformation and disinformation. So they'll never say we're out to censor you. They'll say, well, there's just a great deal of hate speech and disinformation out there. We are out to correct that. They'll never say we're trying to lock up the leading candidate of the opposition party. They'll say, oh, no, to save democracy, we're doing this. So they'll say we're doing this because no one is above the law, Dinesh. And they say this with a straight face, even though you have massive crimes going on, not just at the highest levels of government, but on the streets. And it's quite obvious that this anarchy is being permitted, if not encouraged, by the very party that claims to be, on the case. No one's above the law. But so there's a kind of surrealism to living in America today, particularly if you're paying attention. Now, there are many Americans who are like the antelope or the wildebeest, and they're like grazing happily. And, I'm trying to point out there's a predator behind the trees. Look over there. And they're like, no, Dinesh, it's the wind, And so the movie, in a sense, runs up against the fact that Americans haven't really had a police state. Now, Black Americans have, right? I mean, before slavery, even in the postbellum period, Blacks did live under a police state for a lot of decades. But most Americans haven't. We haven't had that kind of experience here. And Americans are very much like Huckleberry Finn. They're like, things are going to be all right. The pendulum's going to swing back. And they're looking for police states in the cartoon images of a Stalin overcoat or a Hitler mustache, just as you said. And our police state is going to come, with an American accent, not sounding like any of that.
It seems like part of just living in America today is coming to grips with there's very much two different realities going on. Like I just saw a statistic today, crime in New York City is up 64%, just shoplifting specifically, in the last couple of years. And there were a lot. So I was at January 6th just doing man on the street interviews, didn't go in the building or anything, was just there to cover the event because I was there in November and December. And I saw how unfairly the mainstream media was covering these rallies. They would do an early morning flyover and say, oh, there's nobody here. This is a non-event. Trump has no base. And it's been shocking to see in the last in the last year, really, who gets thrown in jail and why, who's made an example of. Yet the summer of love, it seems like there were no consequences for that. It seems like there were no consequences for the politicians who were encouraging this sort of violence and harassment of Republican leaders of all kinds. And it's like, it feels like this is being done to make certain people feel crazy and other people feel like they can just do whatever they want and there'll be no consequences.
Yeah, I think the corruption of the media is a huge part of all this, and some of this goes back quite a long time. I remember this is now the late 1990s, and the New York Times wanted to do a hit job on a conservative newspaper that I used to edit when I was a student at Dartmouth. This goes back to the mid 1980s, and they want to do this hit job on me. And so they assigned a Pulitzer Prize winning writer for Fox Butterfield. That's his name. And this guy says, he quotes me saying this: the question is not whether women should be educated at Dartmouth. The question is whether women should be educated at all. Right. And so this line, this quip, if you will, he goes, Dinesh D'Souza reveals Dinesh D'Souza to be a horrible sexist and stuff. So then I contact Fox Butterfield and I go, Mr. Butterfield, this is a very interesting and maybe a mildly amusing quote, but I didn't say it. It was said by another guy at Dartmouth, Keeney Jones. And in fact, it appears in an article under his name. So you got it wrong. You need to retract it. And then comes the very revealing thing. He goes, no, Dinesh, I'm not going to retract it. I go, well, why not? He goes, because you wrote an article about your campus newspaper many years later, and you quoted that line. And I go, yeah, I quoted it, but I didn't say it. It was said by somebody else. I quoted it. He goes, no, you quoted it, so you said it. And I go, well, by that logic, I can now attribute the line to you, since you've now quoted me saying it in your article. So here's what I'm getting at. You've got a Pulitzer Prize winner of national reputation brazenly lying. And this is a very minor incident, but it flashes my mind back to that because that kind of lying is now normal today. It's comprehensive. I think it's even taught in journalism schools because so many people do it.
And I think a lot of even the New York Times, there's still certain things they've never apologized for. Like one huge thing was the attack on what was it that Hamas attacked a hospital or something like that. And these mainstream outlets, they either are very hesitant to, or they never make retractions or apologies, and it's just allowed to be okay. They're allowed to just basically lie and be like, oops, well, we're not really doing journalism anymore, and that's just has to be okay with everybody.
I mean, their new term, as you know, you probably heard this, Chrissy. It's called stealth editing. So they show up. Oh, they bombed a hospital, and they show a picture. It's not the hospital. It's something else, right? And so this is obviously like journalistic malpractice. Then they'll go back and change the picture, but they'll never say that they had put a previous picture. It was completely false. So the stealth editing in an online age, you can go back and kind of correct your story, but pretend like it was accurate in the first place. No need to apologize. No need to explain.
I wonder if it's because these outlets have just been on the winning team for so long that they're not used to being challenged or having to make corrections. Like they've always just been right.
I think that, and I also go further. I think that they are now of the view that systematic lying is okay because they're dealing with this menace of Donald Trump and the Trump phenomenon. And so remember the slogan, by any means necessary. By any means necessary is if you have to lie, do it. If you have to frame the guy, do it. If you have to give testimony about January 6th and you're a Capitol Hill police officer and you say, I saw this and I saw that, even though you were not even in the building, do it. And so this is a very frightening thing because, again, normally when you think of a police state, you just think of there's Stalin, there are his, 300 goons, and those people are running the whole country and all the evil is concentrated right there. But our police state is an octopus. I mean, it stretches into academia, the media, the nonprofit sector, the government, the digital platforms. So there have to be a lot of malefactors doing bad stuff. Now, they're not all evil people. Some of them are ordinary people motivated by opportunism, a desire to be one of the boys at the FBI, the desire to get a bonus, or have a pension, not to be seen as a troublemaker. And police states have always recognized that you've got to find a way to make good people do really bad things.
Yes, and in your interviews in the film, I think you talk with several former FBI, and they kind of go through how the FBI like truly entraps folks, makes people terrorists. Anyone from a grandma in the rotunda at January 6th to a concerned mom at a school board meeting. And I just think some of those interviews were so fascinating. I was wondering who were the hardest interviews to get for police state?
Well, the hard thing is not so much to kind of get the interview, but it is to get someone who is not accustomed to being in a film, who's not a public figure. They're an ordinary guy, to be able to reveal their experience in a manner that is both cinematic and a manner that holds the interest of the audience. So you cannot do that in a normal way. If you listen to a normal conversation, people have a lot of knows, and that reminds me of the time when, and my grandfather used to say, and so what I'm getting at is in a film, it has to be very tight. For me, a film is like drawing back, a bow and arrow and creating that tension, and you can never let go until the closing credits. So you have to hold the interest of the audience for 100 minutes straight. And to get ordinary people to do that when they're not accustomed to do that. These are not professional actors like Nick Searcy, who plays in the movie and helps us with some of our recreations, to bring out the personality of ordinary people and their stories in a manner that everyone can identify with. That, I think, to me, is the real accomplishment of the movie.
Was the creation of this film a non-linear process? How did creatively you sort of work your way through it? Did it start with just a conversation with Dan and then it went from there?
Yeah, a lot of it is framing the question. And so this film began with, are we becoming a police state? Then I realized, there are a lot of people on the left and they say, yeah, Dinesh, we are becoming a police state. That's because of Trump. That's because the Republicans want to shut us down. They want to take away all our basic rights. They want to suppress the vote. They want to shut down the trans people and so on. So I thought, wait a minute. So this is actually a little different than I had started out with, because it's not a debate about whether we're becoming a police state, but which side is running the police state. And so I set up the movie that way. Let's look at what a police state is. Let's look at how it got started. Let's look at how it developed. How is it organized? Let's look at who's behind it, who's running it, who's in charge. Then we'll be able to know if it's coming from the left or coming from the right. And so that gives a movie is a story, and a documentary is a narrative. a kind of a guided tour through an important question. And so this movie moves from the origin of the police state to Trump, the primary target, to the issue of political prisoners in January 6th. And then it moves to just ordinary guys who are just going about their normal American dream, maybe participating in civic life, a mom who cares about what her kids are learning in school, and then bam, they come face to face with the police state. So it leaves you with the idea that no one is safe. You could be next. And then finally, it just raises the question, how do we defeat this police state? I mean, do we run? Do we get out? Do we take our money out, get our family out? Do we try to fight back? If so, how? What can the ordinary person do? So I want to leave the audience with all those sorts of questions.
A really good example, like you said, of how this affects an ordinary everyday person was the interview you did with the aunt of, gosh, I forget his name, but he was
His
a
name is
younger
Matt Perna. Matt Perna was a January 6th defendant.
and just sort of like, wandered in, was in the rotunda for 14 minutes, wandered out. And his charges escalated to a point where he was getting a domestic terrorist charge as well. And it was the threat of the additional charge, which actually led him to taking his own life, and just seeing the emotion coming from his aunt, and is explaining his whole story of how he's basically a kid still. And he got inspired and excited politically by Trump. And it's just such a tragedy, but such a very good example of how it affects just the average person.
His only terrorist action, so to speak, was shouting USA, USA, USA. Think about that. So we've reached a point in a country where, and again, it's, there's a glaring double standard. I was watching those kind of Palestine Hamas protesters in the Cannon building. They're in an unauthorized building. Virtually all the January 6 charges would apply to them. They were interfering with an official proceeding. And yet, if you looked at those guys, they were into it. They were shouting. You never saw the slightest hint of fear in their eyes that they would be arrested, they would be charged, they would be locked up, they'd be put in solitary, they'd spend months in prison before their trial even came up. None of that. So they literally knew they knew we're above the law. We can do this kind of stuff. Now, the other side can't do it, but we can. And that's, this two-tier system of justice. Police states basically protect their friends and go after their enemies. And we have a justice system that is now kind of a gangster operation, at least as far as patriots and conservatives and Republicans and Christians are concerned.
And it almost seems intentional that it's made to make Christians, Republicans, conservatives, everybody, even a little bit right of center, feel, am I crazy? I'm being treated so differently than someone protesting for BLM, or I like to call it the new PLM. It's the goal to make you kind of apathetic, or to make you feel crazy.
And defeated. It's to make you feel like there's nothing you can do, that kind of helplessness that they want. So it's really important, even in small ways, to defeat the police state. And when I had a case with the Obama administration going back to 2013, I exceeded the campaign finance law by giving too much money, my money, to a college friend of mine who was running for office. Now, this is a technical violation. Normally, you get community service, just a warning. Obviously, I'm a first-time offender, but I felt the full force of the Obama administration and the U.S. government. These guys were trying to lock me up for as long as they could. They ultimately did lock me up for 8 months, or in an overnight confinement camp. But the reason I mention all this is because I knew right away that their goal was really simple. Destroy this man's career. Make sure that he won't be able to write books again. No one's going to want to invite him to speak. He's a convicted felon, and let's take him out of commission. And so I said to myself, I've got to make sure that my career after this is going to be bigger than it was before. Because if that's the case, I win. If not, they win. And so this is the way we have to think. How do we defeat the objectives of the police state every time it manifests itself? And we're doing that right now with our film. There are various cunning ways they're trying to block the film. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make sure they don't succeed.
Yeah, just buy the DVDs, make them stocking stuffers this year. Yes, send people the Rumble link. It's it was a very good film. I want to know how your previous film, 2000 Mules, really opened our eyes to exactly how they were able to do what they did with the 2020 election. How did that film inspire or prepare you to make Police State?
Well, 2000 Mules was, I was reluctant to make that film, as I was reluctant to make this film, because I've been such a kind of rah-rah American. I mean, years ago, I wrote a book called What's So Great About America. I've given speeches for years on campuses on American exceptionalism. Here are the 10 things that make America unique. So I'm very reluctant to make a film like, are we even a free society anymore? And so, nevertheless, and with 2000 Mules, the same thing. I was very reluctant to be pulled into the voter fraud debate because I always felt like there's a lot of smoke, but I don't see really the fire. I hear about affidavits, I hear about anomalies, but I like where's the election fraud? I want to see people robbing Fort Knox. I'm like a movie guy. Show me, where is it? And then when the guys at True the Vote came to me and they showed me geo-tracking and they showed me video evidence, and I'm like, I see some guys trying to break into Fort Knox. So there's a movie there to be made. And of course, the movie is recently quite validated by the case in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where you find in a Democratic primary, the Democrats are cheating against each other, and they're cheating in the identical way of 2000 Mules. You see ballot, drop boxes. You see people coming with backpacks and stuffing ballots in, and the judge looks at it and he goes, I can't even believe this. And he overturns the election. He demands a new election. And so it's interesting that when the Democrats are stealing elections from each other, it goes to court. The judge is ready to look at it. But interestingly, with 2000 Mules, after that movie, even though everyone could kind of see, dead silence, and particularly dead silence from the authorities who are in a position to follow up on it.
Yeah, and I remember after 2016, after Trump won, and it took me a couple years to get on board with Trump. Like embarrassingly, I think I voted for Jill Stein in 2016 just because I didn't know any better. I think I started coming around 2018, 2019, but I just remember the amount of Democrats who were like, "Oh, Trump stole the election. It's definitely rigged," and that was allowed to be okay, that criticism. But after 2020. It's just not okay for certain people to even ask questions. And I hate seeing, I try to not read all the Twitter comments, especially from people who have like 25 followers, but just it pisses me off that people will dismiss you and this film just as, oh, it's right-wing propaganda. It's like, did you even see it? Like, how about watch it first?
Well,
and then
here's the
come to
funny
me
thing,
with a
Chrissie. I mean,
debate.
if you took my exact film, 2000 Mules, and if I were to set it in 2016, and I were to show all the same things, cell phone geo-tracking, and then you see, let's just say you have all these mules, and they keep going to conservative institutions. They go to the National Rifle Association, they go to the Heritage Foundation, they go to AEI, the Chamber of Commerce. They then get these backpacks of ballots, and you can see them on video going from one drop box to another, shoving in ballots. I mean, I think the left would have gone and dragged Trump physically out of the White House in the clear belief, and they would be completely convinced that the election had been stolen from them. So, and yet I use the exact same evidence for 2020. There it is. It's on video. And they're like, nothing to see here. What does this really prove, Dinesh? There could be an innocent explanation. Really? Well, what is the innocent explanation? Why are these people going from one Dropbox to another in the middle of the night? And when you see them on video, they're looking over their shoulder, just as if they're about to rob the place. So if there's an innocent explanation, please provide one.
Exactly. And I know the Twitter files might have been the first big kind of eye-opening moment for a lot of Americans who were like, okay, a lot of us kind of on the right have been saying for a long, long time, look, we can see the signs of the connection between the White House and censorship and big tech. But the Twitter files really provided the receipts that a lot of people needed to kind of be like, okay, wow, there's really something to that. Now, someone who knows way more than me, what do you think? Were there other seeds planted before the release of the Twitter files that to you signaled, wow, okay, I'm starting to really see the connections here and the corruption and the collaboration?
Well, before the Twitter files, the big smoking gun was the Russia collusion hoax, because the idea that Trump was a Russian asset, if not a Russian spy. The idea that the Russians had somehow infiltrated the Trump campaign willingly, that the Trump people were in cahoots with the Russians. I mean, this narrative was relentlessly sustained for 4 years in the Trump administration. It was pushed by every major outlet. People won Pulitzer Prizes for it. And then when it came time to document, and this was the so-called Mueller or Mueller report, he takes a look at it and he goes, there is not a single tie between Trump or the Trump administration and the Russians at all. And so you've essentially been subjected not to one lie, but to a massive lie repeated over the entire term of Trump, intended to immobilize him on all kinds of fronts. And it's completely made up. And not only is it made up, it was made up in the Hillary campaign and then fed to the organs of the deep state, fed by them to the media. So you've got massive institutions of our society knowingly collaborating in a massive deception, and a deception not just on Trump, but on the American people themselves. I mean, this is very shocking stuff. And I think historians are going to look back. I mean, if the United States comes through this and survives, historians will look back and go, that was really demented. There was really nothing like that in American history before. And so we're living in a very interesting time, for better or for worse.
And I'll listen to folks and sometimes even pundits who haven't even updated their knowledge on the fact that Russiagate, there's no backing behind it, but that's what happens. It's mainstream media, they run with these narratives for so long. Some people just don't ever update their operating system, so to speak, and it still remains truth for a lot of people. And the way that the deep state uses the sort of Russiagate template, and they'll sub in COVID-19, they'll sub in January 6th, they'll sub in Hunter Biden laptop. This is, I guess, their system of how they know how to attack and discredit any of their enemies.
Yeah, you see this with, when a police state is fully developed, it quite honestly doesn't need to lie, because it doesn't need to give any explanation at all. So the apparatchiks for Stalin, they show up at the train station, they grab you, come with us. Why am I being arrested? No reason given. You're on a list. Sorry, come with us. That's it. But our police state is full of subterfuge and deception, and in fact really requires acting lessons. Now here's a classic example of what I mean. Fauci. I think what happens is COVID comes out, and Fauci realizes, whoa, I've been funding this gain of function research in America. I know that the Americans have been working in cahoots with the Wuhan lab. I'm going to be blamed for millions of people dying. So I need to fake the narrative. I basically now need to find a way to say that COVID didn't come from the lab at all, but came just accidentally out of a wet market. Now, how do you pull that off? Well, Fauci goes, the good news is I control millions of dollars of government grants. I'm going to call up some world famous virologists who depend on me for grants, and I'm going to commission them to write a paper. Who cares what they really think? Saying it came out of a wet market. The virologists are like, oh yeah, my bread and butter is tied to this. We're happy to write the paper regardless of what we think. So Fauci commissions the paper. They submit it to him in advance. He makes suggestions. They make corrections. He approves it. And then this is sort of the final stage of this tableau or this acting performance. Fauci has a press conference and he pretends like the paper, he just saw it. He's like, some very eminent virologists have produced an important study, not noting that it was his idea. He went to them. He saw it. So this is what I'm saying is our whole society now, even the trusted institutions of the medical profession, people in the white coats that we've trusted all our lives, hey, Dinesh, we got to take out your appendix. Oh, sure, I'll be in on Tuesday. Take it out. We believe these guys. But now there are very good reasons to be skeptical, because we've seen how corruption can infiltrate the FBI, the DOJ, the DHS, the CDC, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, the State Department. Liars, one and all, I'm sorry to say.
The process that you explained for how Fauci kind of got so many signatures on that paper, it sounds so similar to, didn't a bunch of, I don't know if they were FBI or who they were, but a bunch of guys signed something similar in regards to the Hunter Biden laptop, saying, oh, well, this has all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. What does that even mean? You know, they're able to sign something, not even actually have to explain what that means, but it looks and seems official enough for mainstream media to kind of run with.
Well, the whole thing was right. It was essentially a disinformation operation on the American people, and unleashed right before the election, so that even if it was busted later, it's like, oops, okay, well, Biden's already in the White House, so too late, mea culpa. And so what these guys did was they were implying that all the incriminating proof of Biden family corruption, and let's remember, Hunter Biden is not the instigator. He's not smart enough to be the instigator. He has nothing to sell. Joe Biden has something to sell, which is his own influence. And so Joe Biden was the Don Corleone here, and Hunter Biden was the bag man. And all of this is on the laptop, and the FBI knew it. And so this was all intended to divert attention, to pretend like the incriminating truths on the laptop were in fact planted by Russia and were therefore lies. So the same with censorship, by the way. They're not censoring lies. They're the ones putting out the lies. I mean, here's Rochelle Walensky, the head of the CDC, and she's saying, you take the vaccine, you can't get COVID. Really? That's a lie. You take the vaccine, you cannot give somebody COVID. Really? That's a lie. So you've got the government putting out the lies. They're the biggest transmitters of misinformation. And then when you challenge them, they want to ban you. So they're banning you not for putting out misinformation. They're banning you for exposing their misinformation.
They don't even have the receipts, so to speak, to back up what they say. They just know, all right, I'll just call you a white supremacist, I'll call you racist, and maybe I'll just be able to shame you enough into stop asking questions. It's not even that clever of a process, but it's worked. I guess shame does have a huge effect, and especially the way the FBI would like barge into people's houses and like rip them out in the middle of the night and like make a whole scene in front of their families. So much of it is just intimidation and really taking advantage of the human, I guess, like the human condition to want to fit into a crowd. You know, you don't want to stand out. You don't want to look vulnerable, be targeted. You don't want your reputation ruined among your neighbors, your community, your family, friends. It's pretty disgusting.
Well, they'll say things that are flatly false, and they rely on people to be so intimidated that they don't know how to counter. You know, so for example, think about this. We heard right after the 2020 election, for a whole year and a half until 2000 Mules came out. Frankly, after 2000 Mules came out, I never heard this again. But before that, it was heard indefinitely, incessantly. The 2020 election was the most secure election in American history, right? Now, let's say you don't know anything about 2000 Mules. You just take that statement on the face value. It's the most secure election in history. Very interesting. We've had, of course, dozens of elections going way back to the early, to 1800 really was the beginning of elections in the United States. So we've had a lot of elections. And if someone says this was the most secure election in history, you think, okay, well, show me how much fraud there was in 2020, and then go back to all the previous elections, at least let's say the last 10, and show me how much fraud there was in those, and then show me that this fraud in the 2020 election was the least. You need to have some proof before you can make a statement like that this had the least amount of fraud and was therefore the most secure. So then I say, has anybody produced that evidence? No. Has anybody even attempted it? Has anyone even produced a chart, a meme that shows that there was less fraud in 2020 than in 2018, 2016, 2012, 2010? Let's go all the way back. No. So basically, they came up with this. They made it up. It was the most secure election in history, as if the assertion is itself the proof. It was a ridiculous statement when it was first made, even before 2000 Mules came out. But once 2000 Mules was out there, it became a joke.
Just the power of repetition and saying something with complete confidence. Never underestimate that. Another thing I really loved about the film, because I remember during COVID, I was always like, I was dumbfounded as to why so many priests and preachers and like religious folk, church people, I was like, why are these guys such targets? They're not violent. They're not extremists. They're just people like to go to church. They're kind of soft spoken. And I'm like, why go so hard on these people that just want to go to church? And you brought up a really interesting point in the film. and that is these people are targets because you can't have God in communism. And that was just a kind of light bulb moment. I was like, especially when you had the interview with she was from North Korea,
Yeonmi Park.
Yeonmi Park, and you never think of religious folks as a threat in that way. But yes, if you want to break down society, family, structures that made this country great, yeah, you do kind of have to attack religion.
All police states do it. I mean, interestingly, there have been so many different police states. There have been Asian police states, China, North Korea. There have been European police states, Nazi Germany. Of course, there have been South American police states, Cuba. And so it's very odd when you have all these different police states, you would think that they'd all look really different. But no, there's certain common traits. And one of their common traits is they go after the church. In Russia, of course, it was the Russian Orthodox Church. In Nazi Germany, it was the Catholic Church in Bavaria and the Lutheran Church in the rest of Germany. Of course, in China, they go after not only Christianity, but even some of the other Buddhist and Falun Gong people, all of whom were seen as spiritual and therefore out of sync with Chinese communism.
Wow, that's so funny because I remember at each of the Trump rallies, I would see every single time ladies from like Falun Gong, they'd be like Chinese, they'd be like the loudest, most passionate, like, we want to warn you about what is coming for this country. And they would always be there passionately with loudspeakers, warning everyone about the CCP. And it's just, it all makes sense now. I know you have to go soon, Dinesh, but I have a couple questions from the chat here from KMax. Dinesh, why does it feel like the left controls absolutely everything? Did it start at the universities and just filter from there? 95% of media, Hollywood, and colleges are far left and woke. Can the right make a comeback?
Well, I think that it has been a great failure of the right to enable the left, which was dominant in these institutions and has been for a while, but there was also a countervailing presence. I mean, when I was at Dartmouth, for example, in the 1980s, I could name 5 to 7 prominent, outspoken conservative professors at Dartmouth, and I knew at least 5 at Harvard across the way. And then there were other conservatives who were in the engineering department, the economics department. They might be more low key, but they did exist. The idea that you could have a university fully made up of people who all think the same, who essentially the spectrum is from the left to the far left. I mean, this is horrible. This is actually an anathema to what a university is even all about. But I think what we've seen is a takeover to the degree that these institutions, I mean, again, the media was biased to the left. But by biased, we just mean that they had a framework in which they tended to see the left-wing solutions as correct and the right-wing solutions as wrong. I don't think that you would have a media 25 years ago that would be okay with finding a completely innocent American citizen who just happened to be on the wrong side of the aisle, framing him, and then putting him in prison for 10 years when he didn't really do anything. But I think we have many people in the media today who are happy to not only watch that, but cheer for it.
Yeah. Jeez, it's crazy that this is the reality we're living in. Thank you from Push-Ups. Your bio of Reagan was awesome. What is he like in real life?
Reagan was, I mean, a very unique character, and I think had a very important lesson for Republicans and conservatives. And I've tried in my own life to sort of live up to this. He was philosophically very strong, very grounded, very hardcore, but temperamentally a nice guy, easygoing, genial, could do business with people so he was not somebody who tried to like clean out the Republican Party, kick out the rhinos, get rid of the moderates. Rather, his idea was if you got some guy who's a moderate, you kind of bring him in and you talk to him and you go, hey, look, I understand that I understand you think that there are difficult cases which allow for abortion, but surely you will agree that there are extreme cases in the last 3 months, and that should not be allowed. So let's find some middle ground so that we can have a unified Republican Party going forward. I miss that kind of pragmatic conservatism, which I think is the way for us to build a working majority. And Reagan, in that respect, in many ways, we don't live in the Reagan era. And in many ways, the ideas of Reaganism, which were ideas for their time, are not as relevant today. But this particular aspect of Reagan is completely relevant.
Yeah, we should be looking for ways to bring folks together. Okay, one last question from GameX. Is this communist Marxism, but more on race, a race-based Marxism as opposed to the class-based?
Yeah, if you look at the manifesto of the trans shooter, you see essentially the ideology of the left. This is, by the way, why they suppressed the manifesto, right? Because what did the trans shooter hate? Basically,
White
she hated
people.
privilege. And that's the class aspect of Marxism. And the trans shooter hated the fact that he was against whites. So that's the race aspect. Against Christians, that was also brought up. So what you have here is a kind of new type of socialism in America that takes the classic Marxist concept of race. And Marx, of course, used a single lens, race. Race is, class. Class is the dividing line in society for Marx. And what we have is this kind of hybrid in which you take class and then you merge it with race, and then you merge it with gender, and then you merge it with transgender and LGBTQ. And then there may be some other exotic categories that are in there as well. But essentially, this is the concept of intersectionality. The person who's the most victimized has like the most brownie points. I'm not just black, but I'm also a woman, and I'm also poor, and I'm also handicapped, and this kind of thing. It's like a oppression Olympics in which everybody's going for the bottom rung of the ladder.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I should apply for the Oppression Olympics, as I am a ginger. I could say, oh, I'm left-handed. I could say I had to share a room with my sister growing up. It's really
Totally.
It's really great.
And it would also be helpful if you identified as a toad.
I think that's my next move. Dinesh, I'm so sorry for keeping you longer than you said. You're so great to talk to. I love this film. I really want people to go download it and stream it. Any other parting thoughts, words?
Well,
anything you want to say?
I'll just say, we're being blocked on Amazon and Walmart, and they won't let us sell our DVDs. So go to the website, which is policestatefilm.net. There's a bunch of ways to stream the movie. You can just click on the tab and choose how you want to watch it, and you can watch it on any device, including your big screen TV. And then DVDs. We're selling them from Salem. We're selling them from Shopify. Very good customer service. And good to stock up on those for the Christmas presents. So policestatefilm.net is kind of the one-stop shop to find out how to get this movie.
Thank you so much, Dinesh. Thanks for your time, and thanks for making this film.
My pleasure.
Thanks. Thank you, guys. I know Dinesh, I kept him way longer than I promised, but he's so fantastic, and everybody needs to check out this film. Thank you, Daniel Clancy, for becoming a new member. Thank you, A Serious Man. Love you, Chrissy. Glad to see this conversation happen. Yep. Me too. That was really cool. Thank you, A Serious Man, for gifting 5 Chrissie Mayr memberships. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Thank you, guys. Very, very cool. Yeah, you know what I think you should all definitely look into? And this feeds in perfectly to what Dinesh was talking about, and the movie The Police State is go to Jim Jordan, go to his Twitter thread right now. I'll pull it up. I will pull it up for you. Okay. And this came out just earlier this week. Bombshell report on the censorship industrial complex. Hundreds of secret reports show how the DHS, which is Homeland Security, CISA, which is Cybersecurity and Infrastructure, the GEC, which is the State Department, and Stanford and others worked together to censor Americans before the 2020 election, including true information, jokes. So jokes are not allowed, sarcasm, and opinions. And here's a thread. The federal government, disinformation experts at universities, big tech, and others work together through the Election Integrity Partnership to monitor and censor American speech. According to one EIP member, so EIP is the Election Integrity Partnership. According to one EIP member, the EIP was created at the request of CISA, which means our own government requested this. The head of the EIP also said that EIP was created after working on some monitoring ideas with CISA. And here we have, oh boy, my computer is being rainbow right now. Okay. Okay, and here's an email from Graham Brookie at the Atlanta Council. Given the work DFR Lab does on geopolitics, technology, and election interference with GEC, we were just caught off guard because they asked us about it. I am not concerned on the money or the project, but rather consolidating our approach to GEC as we go into the season for expanded renewals on 2 separate multi-year agreements in the 6-figure range that cover a significant amount of our work on elections and all of our work in South Africa and Latin America on the DHS app, fake news, and any other U.S. election-related work. It would be great to sync up as well. I know the council has a number of efforts on broad policy issues around elections, but we just set up an election integrity partnership at the request of DHS CISA and are in weekly comms to debrief on disinfo, IO, etc. Here's another email from Alex Stamos at Stanford. Hey, Kate, do you have any time this afternoon to chat? We are working on some election monitoring ideas with CISA, and I would love your informal feedback before we go too far down this road. Sorry for last minute ask, but things that should have been assembled a year ago are coming together quickly this week. So those are that's proof that they're obviously working together. Jim then goes on to say, here's how it worked. EIP stakeholders, including the federal government, would submit misinformation reports. EIP would then analyze the report and find similar content across platforms. So maybe this has to do with implementing AI. EIP would submit the report to big tech, often with a recommendation on how to censor. So our own government is basically contracting out folks to do the censoring for them. That way they can scoot around our pesky First Amendment. They're essentially laundering their censorship, concealing the source of it. Judiciary, GOP, and weaponization, which is the Weaponization Committee. I just followed these guys on Twitter. That's the official account for the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government, Chairman Jim Jordan. Obtain these non-public documents and information from Stanford only after the threat of contempt. So they did not want to give these documents up readily. They had to literally be threatened with contempt. And you can read the details in the report here. So this report is 104 pages long. So it's not what you would call like light summer reading. But there's plenty of summaries of this online. Who was targeted? Americans of all political stripes, but especially conservatives. And you can see who they targeted here. Obviously, Trump, Senator Tom Tillis. He is North Carolina Senator. Newt Gingrich, Mike Huckabee, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Sean Hannity, M.Z. Hemingway, Molly Hemingway, who's the editor of The Federalist. Oh, but there's more. Who is this person? Harmeet Dillon. Okay. Founder of Dillon Law. She, I think, represented Alex Berenson, who was the guy who was banned from Twitter for just simply, I think, dropping some truths about COVID. Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens, Jack Posobiec, Benny Johnson, Tom Fitton. Who's Tom Fitton? President of Judicial Watch. The Babylon Bee. The Babylon Bee is censored. Okay? This is why I'm so passionate about this, because comedy is affected here. Satire, sarcasm. No one is safe. It didn't stop there. Here are some more accounts that were targeted. Newsmax, Michelle Malkin. I'm not familiar with her. Sean Davis, who is the CEO and co-founder of The Federalist. Dave Rubin. Paul Sperry, who's a senior reporter at Real Clear Investigations. We're seeing a trend here, yeah. Tracy Beans, who I just interviewed. She's the editor-in-chief of Uncover DC. Chanel Ryan from OAN. She was the OAN chief White House correspondent. James O'Keefe. We see what they did with James O'Keefe. What speech was targeted for censorship? True information jokes, political opinions. Here are a few examples. So here is a tweet from Trump from November 7th, 2020. Georgia counties using same software. Oh, my touch screen is being gay. Okay. Georgia counties using same software as Michigan counties also encounter glitch from Breitbart. What a total mess this election has been. Of course, they're going to censor that. And this is from Tom Tillis. Thank you for this historic victory, North Carolina. Looking forward to 6 more years of fighting for you and your family in the U.S. Senate. Wow. Seems like a pretty innocuous tweet, but they're censored. Here are some more examples. So this is from what? Huckabee. Oh, Newt Gingrich. Pennsylvania Democrats are methodically changing the rules so they can borrow the election. It's amazingly open, dishonest, ruthless, and will work unless the state, especially Philadelphia, is flooded with law enforcement. And then, let's see, is this Huckabee here? He's a sticker that says, so here's the sarcasm joke, satire part of it. So this is from Governor Mike Huckabee. Stood in the rain for an hour to vote early today. When I got home, I filled in my stack of mail-in ballots and then voted the ballots of my deceased parents and grandparents. They vote just like me, Trump 2020. Clearly a joke, but not allowed. And that was censored. Or I don't know, straight up deleted. Who did we miss? Did you have a social media post that was targeted by the EIP? It's clear why Stanford only produced these after the judiciary, GOP, and weaponization threatened contempt. So here's the email, or here's a letter from Jim Jordan. The committee subpoena imposes legal obligations on SIO to comply and produce responsive materials. Thus, your client's refusal to produce documents responsive to the committee's subpoena 4 weeks after the subpoena return date is highly concerning. Accordingly, the committee expects the SIO will complete its production of responsive documents in full by no later than Wednesday, June 14th, 2023 at 5 p.m. If Stanford fails to comply in full with the subpoena's demands, the committee may be forced to consider the use of one or more enforcement mechanisms. Thank you for your client's attention to this matter. So they did not want to hand these over. The American people deserve to know if they were targeted by their own government and so-called disinformation experts. The committee is making the data from these reports publicly available here, so you can go read them. As always, more to come. Read our report here, judiciary.house.gov. Stay tuned. Dave Rubin says, what's the recourse when the government is proven to have trampled on your First Amendment rights? Oh, and this is, I guess, Dave Rubin was made to delete this tweet here. They want a federal jab mandate for jabs, which are, this is from July 29th, 2021. They want a federal jab mandate for jabs, which are clearly not working as promised just weeks ago. People are getting and transmitting the coof despite the jab. Plus, now they're prepping us for booster shots. A sane society would take a pause. We do not live in a sane society. He had to delete this. Wow. There is no recourse, Dave. It's just you have to accept that we live in 2 different realities, like what Dinesh was talking about. Mindy Robinson says, just think about how fragile this whole deep state house of cards is that they had to demand independent, no-name journalists like me to be banned because we were threatening to the election borrowing that was blatantly going on with the fake news media's help. Wow, Martha Bueno. Who did you miss? You missed an entire presidential candidate. Her entire social media team. It was just Jo Jorgensen. During the evening of the first debate in Ohio, as Jo Jorgensen was beginning to gain some notoriety on her Google Analytics showed a spike in search for her name. Every single Jo Jorgensen GIF and hashtag was deleted. Every member of her team was banned from multiple platforms. The government does not want competition in elections. No, they do not. So interesting thread here on Jim Jordan's Twitter. And if you have time and you want to read through the whole 104 pages, I'll just show you guys the highlights. No, I haven't read 104 pages yet. I like to look at the pictures, as you guys know. So here it is. You can go on judiciary.house.gov. The weaponization of disinformation, pseudo-experts, and bureaucrats, how the federal government partnered with universities to censor Americans' political speech. This came out just 2 days ago. Following the 2016 presidential election, a sensationalized narrative emerged that foreign disinformation, this is like what we talk about, like with Russiagate, affected the integrity of the election. These claims, fueled by left-wing election denialism about the legitimacy of Trump's victory, sparked new focus in the role of social media platforms in spreading such information. Disinformation, think tanks and experts, government task forces, and university centers were formed, all to study and combat the alleged rise in mis and disinformation. As the House Committee on the Judiciary and Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government have shown previously, these efforts are to combat so-called foreign influence, and misinformation quickly mutated into domestic, that is American speech, also known as regular people, like moms at a school board meeting or a grandma who wandered into the rotunda, that sort of thing. Let's go to the pictures, Chrissy. Okay. So here's basically what happened. Federal government via CISA and the GEC began working with election integrity partnership folks, like that's Stanford. I think one of them was the University of Washington. And then they pass. So the government passes on their desires through academia and then onto our social media platforms. So and then we saw in the Twitter files the direct relationship between the federal government and big tech platforms. That's one of the most viral clips from Joe Rogan podcast when Zuckerberg was on talking about they made us meet with them like fairly regularly. So they get these experts, then they tell the experts what results they want them to find. And here was everyone who was being censored. All these high profile folks, but also an untold number of everyday Americans of all political affiliations. Let's see if there's more pictures. A lot of this is probably boring. Oh, and it goes through the glossary of key terms and names, so you can figure out what all these organizations stand for. I know it's a lot of initials to remember, but just insane, so groundbreaking, shocking, but not shocking at the same time. You can read through these emails. I feel so official. I'm sitting here in a blazer, going through a government document. Some of it's boring. I'm being honest, they could throw in a few more pictures here. Wow. But if you bring this up, you're just a right-wing extremist. Right? Okay. So check that out. I will put the links to that report in the description of this episode. Thanks again so much to Dinesh. He said he could only do a half hour, and I kept him for 45 minutes, so I'm sorry. I hope he didn't have to miss, or I hope he wasn't late for anything. But he's just so great to talk to, and what a great get. Go watch Police State. I watched it on Rumble, but you can also view it on, let me bring up the website, policestatefilm.net. You can stream it on Salem Now or Rumble. Oh, you want to watch the trailer? Okay.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
Chief Division Counsel and DOJ have approved the no knock brief.
Okay, I'm going to pause this for a minute so I can think. What a super chat. Why, thank you, K-Max. Chrissy, have you had Mindy Robinson on as a guest before? I always thought she'd be interesting. Her Twitter is that same name. Yes, I have had Mindy Robinson on. It's been a while, though. So she's definitely due to come back. I will put her on my to-do list, K-Max. Thank you, darling. Okay, let's try watching this again.
Breach We want the subject to be on display, doing the walk of shame, full visual impact. Any questions?
Are we?
And that's Nick Searcy, who plays the main sort of FBI agent. You may recognize him from the Daily Wire's Terror on the Prairie, or you may recognize him as my opener from the shows I did in LA recently.
Becoming a police state?
The government told American citizens they couldn't go to church on Sunday.
I've never seen anything like it. It may be the Russia other people grew up in, but not my America.
FBI warrant, come to the door now!
There's a heavy banging at my door. Open up! It's 15 marked units on my property. I got SWAT in the back of my house.
It took a battering ram to my door.
6 a.m. I hear boom, 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 and hear about 6 to 8 military-style soldiers with the tallest one of them pointing an automatic rifle at my head. FBI, we have an arrest warrant!
Shock you out of sleep, drag you out of your house half clothed, refuse to give you a warrant, ransack your house.
Now I'm facing 15 years in federal prison
For doing nothing other than exercising my right to free speech.
I had no reason to be attacked.
I hope that you remember
Matt's name and the role you played.
This was the aunt of Matthew Perna, who took his own life after being threatened with a domestic terrorism charge after wandering into the rotunda on January 6th.
Killing him.
How did we give the state this kind of power?
9/11 changed everything. We're going to expand the Bureau from law enforcement to domestic intelligence. Legal shackles are now off.
It used to be Islamic terrorism. That threat has kind of dissipated.
Our focus is shifting.
They're moving to domestic extremism. Really paints anybody who's right of center.
What we need is a person to look at. And then we go find out what crime you did. If you're a pro-life, pro-family Catholic, they define you as radical. The demand for domestic terrorism vastly outstrips the supply. When candidate Trump came down the escalators, the government had a meltdown.
We are going to drain the swamp. We'll see about that.
It's almost like when you hear about cops having a ticket quota every month. That's sort of like what the FBI had with, finding domestic extremist potential folks.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you.
The Patriot Act and FISA were used against Donald Trump. Google literally rewrote their news algorithm based upon what Trump was doing so that they could get this guy. You just take out the word Russiagate and you put in COVID origins. You take out COVID origins and you put in Hunter Biden's laptop. You take that out and you put in January 6th. It's the replicated play from the deep state and their partners in the media. They're not just deplatforming you. They are trying to throw people in prison.
If they're coming for me, they're coming for you.
Hands on your head! These are anti-government.
We have freedom of religion and freedom of speech!
Violent extremists, and they must be dealt with. We can do anything we want.
Police State.
Ooh.
Exclusively in theaters October 23rd and 25th. Tickets sold only on policestatefilm.net.
Ooh. There you go, guys. Check it out. Thank you, Dinesh. That was very cool. Thanks for coming on. Thank you guys in the chat. Thank you for being on your best behavior. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the intelligent questions. Let me check over on Rumble. Okay, good. I didn't miss anybody. I was worried that I may have missed a Rumble rant or something. Okay, cool. Sweet. Thank you guys. Check out policestatefilm.net. Follow Dinesh on Twitter. What a lovely man. What a great time. And I'll see you guys. I'll see you next time. And by the way, we're doing Whatever Wednesday on Thursday tomorrow. So tune in around, I guess, 9, 10 o'clock. We'll figure it out. But we'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.